The little girl stood frozen in the doorway, her bare feet pressed against the cold tile as if the floor itself might give way beneath her. Her pink pajamas, once soft and warm, clung to her from tears and fear. She had been crying for so long that her eyes burned, but she didn't dare wipe them. Both hands were raised, small and shaking, just like she had seen in the movies when people begged not to be hurt. "Please, please don't hurt us," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. Behind her, the living room looked like a place that had already been defeated. A lamp lay shattered on its side. A chair was overturned. Her mother stood near the wall, clutching her baby brother tightly to her chest, rocking him to keep him quiet. The phone in her hand had a spiderweb crack across the screen, broken when she tried to call for help. The men were big, too big. Their shadows swallowed the room, stretching across the walls and over the family photos. One of them leaned against the table, tapping his fingers impatiently, while another sniffed the air like a predator deciding where to strike first. "She's just a kid," her mother cried. "Please, take whatever you want and leave." The man in the leather jacket laughed, a low, ugly sound. "We are taking what we want," he said. "And what we want is money." The girl swallowed hard. Her heart hammered so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. She glanced back at the hallway, half expecting her father to suddenly appear, like he used to after long work trips, lifting her into the air and telling her everything would be okay. But the hallway stayed empty. "Daddy doesn't have money," the girl said, forcing the words out. "He's just working." The men exchanged amused looks. "Then he shouldn't have borrowed from the wrong people," the leader replied coldly. Tears spilled down her cheeks, dripping onto the floor. She took one small step forward, placing herself between the men and her mother without even realizing it. Her knees trembled, but she didn't move away. "He's coming home," she said again, softer now, like a promise she was afraid to break. "Please, just wait." The men didn't believe her. But somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and shaking breath, the little girl held on to one thing with all her strength. Hope. The man in the leather jacket took a slow step forward, his boots thudding against the tile like a countdown. He crouched until his face was level with the little girl's, close enough that she could smell the alcohol on his breath. His smile was thin and sharp, the kind that didn't belong on anyone who meant well. "Your daddy," he said quietly, made a promise he couldn't keep. The girl flinched but didn't run. Her hands dropped to her sides, curling into tight fists as if she could hold herself together that way. Tears blurred her vision, yet she forced herself to look at him. Somewhere behind her, her baby brother began to whimper. "Leave her alone," her mother shouted, stepping forward. One of the men shoved her back against the wall. The sound of her shoulder hitting the plaster made the girl gasp. She spun around, panic flooding her chest. "Mom." The leader stood up slowly, eyes cold. "Stay where you are," he warned the woman. "Unless you want this to get worse." The house no longer felt like home. Every familiar object had turned into a weapon or a reminder of how small they were. Drawers were yanked open, their contents dumped onto the floor. The men ripped couch cushions apart, shaking them violently as if money might fall out. "Where is it?" one of them barked. "We don't have anything," the mother cried, tears streaming down her face. "Please, you're making a mistake." The girl watched as one man knocked a framed photo off the shelf. The glass shattered when it hit the floor. She stared at the picture, her father smiling in a plain suit, his arm around her shoulders at her school recital. He didn't look rich. He didn't look dangerous. "He's not a bad person," the girl said softly. "He wouldn't hurt anyone." The leader picked up the photo, studying it for a moment before tossing it aside. "Bad people don't always look bad," he said. "And rich men don't always look rich." He turned back to the girl. "If your father doesn't show up soon," he added, "you're going to see what happens when adults don't keep their promises." Her breath caught. The words sank into her like ice. She wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but instead she squeezed her eyes shut and whispered the only thing she could think of. "Daddy, please come home." The room fell into a tense silence. Then, somewhere beyond the door, a car engine cut off. Everyone froze. The sound of the car engine dying outside sliced through the tension like a blade. For a single breath, no one moved. Even the men stopped tearing through the house, their bodies stiff, eyes darting toward the front door. Click. The lock turned. The little girl opened her eyes. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow, controlled, unhurried. Not the steps of someone afraid, and not the steps of someone surprised. They were the steps of someone who knew exactly what he was walking into. "Who's there?" one of the men snapped, reaching for his waistband. The door opened fully, and the man stepped inside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark tailored coat that didn't belong in a broken living room. His expression was calm, almost frighteningly so. His gaze swept across the scene, the overturned furniture, the shattered glass, his wife pressed against the wall, his son crying in her arms. Then his eyes found his daughter. Everything else disappeared. "Get away from my family," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. It settled into the room like a command that didn't need repeating. The leader scoffed. "And who do you think you?" Before he could finish, more figures appeared behind the man. 3 of them, suits, earpieces, hands resting close to their jackets. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. One of the intruders took a step back. Another swallowed hard. The father walked forward, never breaking eye contact with the men. He stopped in front of his daughter and slowly knelt down, placing himself between her and the danger. His hands were steady as he brushed the tears from her cheeks. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "I'm here." She collapsed into him, sobbing, clutching his coat like it was the only real thing left in the world. "I told them you were coming," she cried. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, holding her tightly. When he stood again, his gentleness vanished. One of the men whispered, "That's him." Phones vibrated in pockets. A name was searched. A photo matched. Color drained from their faces. "You were supposed to be gone," the leader muttered. The father tilted his head slightly. "I was," he replied. "So I could find all of you." Sirens began to rise in the distance, first faint, then unmistakable. The men dropped their weapons. The father didn't smile. "Game's over." The police stormed the house in a rush of blue and red lights, voices sharp and commanding. Hands were forced behind backs. Metal cuffs snapped shut. The men who had filled the room with fear only minutes earlier were now silent, their eyes lowered, their arrogance stripped away. The little girl stayed buried against her father's chest as officers moved around them. She could feel his heartbeat. Slow, steady, unbreakable. It was the sound she hadn't realized she'd been waiting for. Her mother stood frozen, still holding the baby, shock etched into her face. "I don't understand," she whispered. "They said you owed them." The father turned to her, his expression finally softening. "I never owed them," he said gently. "They owed justice." Outside, black SUVs lined the street. Men and women in suits stepped forward, flashing badges. One of them approached the father and nodded with respect. "The entire operation is exposed," he said. "Accounts frozen. Arrests already underway." The truth spilled out in fragments, enough to piece together the mystery. For months, the father had disappeared by design. He had gone undercover, infiltrating a powerful criminal financial ring that laundered money through shell companies and fake debts. To the world, he had looked like a struggling businessman drowning in obligations. In reality, he was a self-made millionaire who had sacrificed comfort, reputation, and even safety to dismantle something far bigger than himself. "I couldn't tell you," he said to his wife, his voice heavy. "The less you knew, the safer you were." Tears filled her eyes, not of fear this time, but relief. She stepped into his arms, careful not to wake the baby, and held him like she might never let go again. The little girl looked up at her father. "Are they gone?" she asked. He nodded. "They can't hurt anyone anymore." She smiled through tears, then yawned, exhaustion finally winning. He lifted her gently, carrying her toward her bedroom, stepping over the broken glass and chaos like it no longer mattered. As dawn crept through the windows, the house grew quiet. The nightmare was over. In the days that followed, headlines would explode. Names would fall. Fortunes would vanish overnight. The man they had threatened was revealed to be one of the most influential witnesses in the country. But none of that mattered to him. What mattered was this: every night after that, the little girl slept with her door open. And every night, her father was home.